You know the feeling, we've all been there. You're writing something down, maybe something really important, the pen is full of ink, and then, poof, it just stops. Nothing. It's got to be one of the most common and infuriating little mysteries of daily life. So today, we're going to get to the bottom of it and figure out what is really going on. So what do? You start scribbling like crazy in the margins. You shake the pen, maybe you give it a good whack on the table. But nope, it's no use. You can see the ink right there staring back at you, but it just refuses to come out. Let's call this the case of the dead pen. All right, to crack this case, first we need to understand what's supposed to be happening on a microscopic level. So let's shrink way, way down and take a peek inside the very tip of a ballpoint pen. We're going to uncover the simple but honestly brilliant engineering that makes it work. So, at the heart of this whole thing is an incredibly small, super hard ball. It's usually made of something called tungsten carbide, and it sits in a tiny little socket right at the very tip of the pen. This little ball, believe it or not, is the key to everything. Honestly, the best way to picture how this works is to think of it like a miniature paint roller. It's a fantastic analogy. As you write, the ball just rolls across the paper. One side of the ball is dipping into the ink reservoir, picking up a fresh coat, while the other side is rolling that ink smoothly onto the page. It's this continuous, really elegant process. Okay, so if the system is that simple, why on earth does it fail so often? Now that we know how our tiny paint roller is supposed to work, let's play detective and investigate the primary suspects that cause the whole thing to jam up. In our investigation, we found that for most cases of pen failure, there are three main culprits. So let's unmask them, one by one. Suspect number one is the air bubble. You ever try to write a note on something taped to the wall or while you're lying down? Well, when you point the pen upwards, gravity does its thing and pulls the ink away from the tip. A little air bubble gets in there, creating a gap between the ball and the ink. It's exactly like getting air in a drinking straw. You can suck all you want, but you're not getting any liquid. The ball is spinning, but it's just rolling dry. All right, next up, we have the invisible roadblock. Over time, all sorts of microscopic gunk. We're talking tiny paper fibers, dust, even the natural oils from your fingers, can get wedged into that little socket around the ball. This stuff acts like a tiny rock jamming up our paint roller. It just physically stops the ball from rotating freely, so it can't transfer any ink. And now for our final and honestly most destructive culprit, the fatal fall. Dropping your pen, especially if it lands tip down, can be a death sentence. That little socket holding the ball is engineered with incredible precision. If it gets dented by as little as 1/1000th of a millimeter, that's thinner than a human hair, the ball can get permanently jammed. The pen is essentially paralyzed. Game over. But hold on, before you give up and toss that pen in the trash, there are a couple of science-based tricks you can try to bring it back from the dead. Okay, the first method is what I like to call the warm bath. If the problem is just some dried, gummy ink clogging things up, soaking the tip in some warm water for a few minutes can work wonders. The warmth helps dissolve and loosen that hardened ink, clearing the way for the ball to get rolling again. Think of it as giving your pen a nice, relaxing spa treatment. Okay, for our second method, we need to pause for a second because this is super important. This next trick involves heat and it should only be performed by an adult. Please be careful. Right, so the heat trick. You take a lighter and pass the metal tip of the pen very briefly through the flame. And when I say briefly, I mean it. The science here is something called thermal expansion. That quick blast of heat makes the metal socket expand just a tiny, tiny bit, but often it's just enough to loosen a ball that's been jammed by some debris or a small dent. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, it turns out that our humble little ballpoint pen actually has a few lessons to teach us about engineering and, maybe a little bit about care. We tend to think of ballpoint pens as cheap, disposable things, right? You get a pack of 10 for a couple of bucks, but they're not just plastic tubes of ink. Each and every one is a small, precision-engineered mechanical device that relies on microscopic tolerances to work the way it's supposed to. And you know what? Protecting this little machine is surprisingly easy. First, always put the cap back on. This keeps the tip from drying out and picking up all that gunk we talked about. And second, try not to drop it. Just treating it with a little bit of care can prevent almost all of the failures we've gone over. Which leaves us with one last question. The next time you pick up a pen, are you going to see it as just another disposable tool? Or are you going to see it for what it truly is? A tiny, brilliant piece of precision machinery that you can hold right there in your hand. Something to think about.